Molly Scott Cato, Green MEP for the South West. We've had a vote today on GM crops. What's the implications? What are going to be the implications of this vote? Do you think it's now looking more likely that we'll see GM in places like the southwest of England?
What we've seen today is that when the nation states of Europe don't agree on a certain policy, then we can break through the actual feeling of the citizens of Europe, in this case that they don't want to have GM crops, and we can have an agreement that individual states can opt out. And since the British government have already said they're pro-GM crops, then we're going to be seeing a lot more of them in Britain, I'm afraid to say.
What are the constituents of the Southwest telling you? What kind of things do you have in your post bag? Do you have a mixture of people both pro and anti? And why do you think it is that Europe's ended up, in effect, allowing GM to go ahead in at least some countries like the UK?
To be honest, I haven't had very much lobbying at all on this issue, and it hasn't really been seen to be an issue, and there hasn't been very much debate, because this is really a deal that's been stitched up behind closed doors. There was a blockage in the Council, and what that means is we need to negotiate more until we have agreement between the different countries. But I think the agri-tech companies were not happy with that, and they were keen to actually break through that blockage so that they could sell their GM crops. And as a consequence of that, we're going to see different policies in different countries, and it really undermines the single market that lies at the heart of what we're trying to achieve here in Europe.
What are your, let's be simple then, in simple terms, what are your concerns about GM crops? Why are they so bad from your point of view?
There is a lot of evidence that actually GM crops are bad for human health, and at minimum you could say that the science on this was contested, and we believe when there isn't clear scientific evidence saying that a certain crop is safe, then the precautionary principle says that you shouldn't have that crop being grown. So we still completely oppose GM crops, whether it's for animal feed or whether it's to enter the human food chain, and we will have both of those and more of both of those following the decision taken today.
We hear from people in favour, including the farming groups, saying that it will lead to more research into GM, which could mean jobs, and that GM crops themselves could lead to perhaps less pesticides being used on the fields, and also better food production. Aren't those reasons to support GM?
We hear an awful lot of lobbying and an awful lot of claims made on behalf of GM crops, but the science really doesn't support those. It's a sort of industry lobbying for its own products in order to increase its own profits. The people of Europe have rejected GM, and they still hold that position that they don't want to have this food being for human consumption or animal consumption. And I think my job is to represent their views, and if other people are lobbying for their own interests, then that doesn't have to influence what I do.
Do you see today's vote then as a knockback for the environment in the southwest?
I think we've seen quite a lot of concerning decisions taken since this commission came in that shows that they don't prioritise environmental issues. I think this will damage the environment in the southwest and across Europe.
Are there unintended consequences of GM crops that we perhaps don't currently know about, and we don't fully understand all the results of planting GM in the future, for the future, in the longer term?
Well, one of the most concerning aspects of this is that we cannot isolate GM crops from other crops, and there's likely to be cross-contamination. And when you're introducing into a certain important food crop a gene that's never belonged there through a natural process, that really could start to threaten some of the crops we rely on for our survival. So I think it's a really dangerous move, and that's why we think the precautionary principle says that we should have a complete ban on GM crops in the European Union.